Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who's done all his Thanksgiving shopping. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Is that true?
It is not true. I still have to get the ingredients for a pie crust, I do believe.
So the only thing you're missing from your Thanksgiving shopping is the ingredients?
I mean, mostly, yeah. For the crust.
Well, in your defense, you have been busy doing a lot of podcasts.
This is very true.
We are stacking them up over this 24-hour period, pretty much to make sure that, one, we can take Thursday and Friday off, but two, we fill people's podcast queues so they can have plenty audio for those long commutes.
This is very true. And don't forget, we've got Top Drawer Soccer Show in there as well. So
yes.
It's been a very busy day of podcasting for me.
And there's the Champions League review show. If you've somehow missed that, it should be one down in your queue. That was recorded earlier today. And then tomorrow we're going to do a sort of Thanksgiving, what we're thankful for kind of special. We agreed? We did agree this plan, right? Today...
I also went ahead and updated my Mac software today, so I now have High Sierra, and that process was only slightly more frustrating than the Columbus-Toronto game. So that's good.
All right, so today's show, we're going to talk MLS playoffs, answer some listener questions, maybe talk Caleb Porter, because we haven't hit that yet, and then do some scouting. So you said Columbus-Toronto was frustrating. I don't disagree. Yeah. It finished 0-0. Why was it frustrating, or what frustrated you, I guess?
I think because Toronto did more or less exactly what they set out to do. They changed their game plan. They went defensive because that's pretty much what they had to do and what they needed to do, being on the road.
Yeah,
and
with no Josie, no Giovinco, right?
Yeah, a 0-0 draw will do that. But that wasn't necessarily what made it frustrating. It was just sort of like, oh, okay, that's how this game's going to go. It opened up a little bit more at the end, but generally speaking, it was not the most exciting of affairs. But all the stuff kind of going on around the game, I think, did make it a little bit more interesting than it otherwise would have been. Well,
that made it frustrating for me because, I'm big into the idea that if Columbus have a strong showing in Win MLS Cup, then it makes it all the harder to move the team. And so this was a big opportunity, right? I mean, the fans did their part in filling out MAPFRE Stadium, right? Wasn't there a thing of...
Eventually.
Some people couldn't even get in?
So from what I've read, it started with, I think there was a FedEx truck that got into an accident. So there were people, it usually takes 20 minutes to get to the stadium. It took a lot of people 45 minutes to an hour, which then put them behind. They already knew there was going to be a big backup because there had been previously in other games. This time was no exception. There was only one security team, I think, so it made it really difficult for people to get in on time.
I see. Which still sounded nice and loud to me. So
yeah, I think by the end they got everybody in there.
Yeah. But it really was the opportunity to, basically score a couple goals so that when the Crew go to Toronto, they've got a good chance of winning. And I would argue that, like you said, Toronto went with kind of five at the back in some ways, right? It was almost like a 5-4-1 with St. Ricketts up top, ready to sort of get on the end of any sort of Vasquez through balls. But then, from what I saw, Greg Berhalter didn't make the more attacking change of bringing on Kekuta Mane until the last, 12 minutes? Yeah. And that's when this game really livened up for me. I was really, really into it for that last 12 minutes.
Yeah, I think Taylor Twellman was really waiting for Kekuta Mane to come on because within, 1 minute of coming on, he kind of got the ball and had a shot that went about 10 yards wide.
Yeah, a surprise shot. I want to call that a surprise shot. No one saw that coming. I guess
so.
Yeah.
But Twellman reacted to that like Kekuta Mane had just done like a Maradona-esque dribble through the defense and had this beautiful shot. It was like, he took a touch, took another touch, and then shot the ball, and it went wide. Okay, but that was kind of what that game was then. It was a good example of that game that sort of
it needed
little bit of enthusiasm was like, hey, whoa, things are coming alive now.
Yeah, and the other reason it livened up is because Kekuta Mane didn't really do that much apart from after he had that injection of life into the game. But it seemed like did Justin Merrim come in field a little bit and Harrison Afful got forward a lot more, and suddenly it's like Columbus had just more pace and attacking threat out wide instead of just the series of bad crosses that had been coming in before that.
Yeah, and I think that was intentional. I saw
the bad crosses.
Well, no, I think a couple people had talked about talked about how last season Toronto had sort of questioned not having the kind of pacey winger that can cause problems out wide. And that was still a concern going into this game, and it seems like maybe Columbus were trying to exploit that by having some pacey, exciting players out wide doing some things. It's just those things didn't really end up coming off.
And I think was it Mane who had a chance in the end? I think Drew Moore kind of fluffed a clearance, and Harrison Afful, maybe if he took it first time, it's not such an easy save. And then Kekuta Mane had the follow-up. That felt like the best chance of the game to me.
Yeah, I think so. And that, again, says something because there were not that many chances in this game. I did want to say I very much enjoyed – I couldn't quite make it out, so I went and checked, and I found what Columbus fans were singing at one point, and it made me laugh very hard. Would you like to know my favorite cheer? It might not just be Columbus fans. It might be like an MLS thing, but I had never heard it till tonight. Singing to Canadian fans, or to a Canadian team, your bacon is ham, your bacon is ham, F you Canada, your bacon is ham.
I was going to say that's nice and friendly, apart from the swear word.
Not there yet.
Was it? But that seems like a friendly taunt.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And it was not so friendly for Michael Bradley, I'll say that much.
No, he booed basically every time he got the ball.
Literally every time he got the ball, yeah. I think so. Yeah, and I don't know what to make of that. I really don't, because when it was Atlanta fans doing it, I was sort of like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way it goes.
Because that was after the World Cup thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, and this
the World Cup thing being the failure to qualify for the World Cup.
The recent unpleasantness,
yes.
Daryl. Recent unpleasantness. And I understand that, like, that's still why he's getting booed. It's not like he's done, or at least he hadn't done anything worse. Since then, he's made a couple comments that were not great. But it did feel a little bit excessive to me because, like, when does that stop? Is it like when the United States next qualifies for a World Cup? Is that when we stop booing, or do we just never stop booing him ever again?
I mean, I think there'll be a point.
I'm going to need you to let me know, Daryl, right now.
I mean, I'll let you know when it happens. How about that?
Okay.
Next time I see Bradley play and he's not booed, I'll let you know.
Mm-hmm. and then my final note on this game, which is another thing away from the field for a second, is I couldn't figure out sort of why, from an aesthetic standpoint, I wasn't really enjoying it until I flipped out to Fox's coverage, and then I saw a bunch of people commenting on the fact that I guess ESPN notoriously for soccer games don't have like particularly high resolution cameras when they film soccer. So, and I went and looked. I really did do like took photos and compared, and it is definitely the case that the resolution for ESPN was not nearly as good, and it definitely makes this for this weird sort of like, what is that blurry? Why is that blurry? It shouldn't be blurry.
So should let listeners know I'm recording from home today for dog sitting reasons. Are you in the office right now, the TSS office?
I am indeed.
Did you watch the game in the TSS office?
I did indeed.
Okay, so I think that it makes it clearer because we do have a pretty big TV in there, right, to watch the games on with good resolution. So I think it magnifies flaws. I think if a broadcaster's cameras are not so good looking or not so high definition, I think it becomes really obvious on that big TV.
Yeah. So that was a little bit disappointing as well.
Anything else on this game?
No, I mean, other than it seems pretty well poised for a Toronto victory at home, but stranger things have happened. We shall see.
So the one thing I would say is this game really felt like to me it would have benefited from just single elimination, no two-legged playoff, because it just had the feeling of like, we'll see this game through, especially from Toronto's standpoint. I really just prefer it to be done on the night. I feel like that game, especially because it did liven up that last 12 minutes. If that was building to a crescendo of someone is going out tonight, then it adds a lot more drama to proceedings, right? Instead of, it's basically half-time and it's 0-0 in a 180-minute game.
Yes, and I'll probably get some stick for this because I know this is like MLS playoffs. People are very excited about Major League Soccer, but I think the reality is that in other competitions, when you have this, I think the most obvious one would be the Champions League, where everything up until the final is home and away or home and home, depending on how you want to phrase that one. In the knockout round,
yeah.
But that's also...
I want to phrase it home and away, by the way.
So do I. Who says home and home?
I don't know. I think Albert got me doing it once or twice, but then I decided not to.
That's why Albert's not here anymore. That's the single reason right there. It's like tabs and spaces with Richard Hendrick. But I think that, like, in that situation, that is literally the best players in the world. So if it is a team going to the Bernabeu or the Camp Nou and they're really shutting it down and trying to play defensive, it's interesting because it's the best players in the world playing defensive. Or with Inter, it's like Samuel out wide trying to and it does make it a little bit more interesting. Whereas there were moments in this game where it felt very like just kick it long, just get it out of here, push it all the way back to their goalkeeper, and then let's let them go again. And it just didn't have that sort of cat and mouse drama to it that I think would have made it a bit more captivating.
Well, I think, especially with a two-leg, say, UEFA Champions League game, mistakes get punished hard, right? So that Drew Moore clearance that fell to Harrison Afful, if that was, I don't know, if that was Danny Carvajal, I feel like he finishes that.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I'm saying? So there we go. We need to make MLS playoffs just one leg, and we need to replace Harrison Afful with Danny Carvajal.
Yeah. Yeah, that works.
I think Columbus should propose a trade with Real Madrid.
As long as we're restructuring MLS playoffs, can we also make sure that if you have two games happening on the same night, you maybe don't have them overlap? That'd be nice.
That was really frustrating, right? So not only is there... I think I'm getting into complaining mode here, but not only we didn't get truth in kickoffs, right? Even the first game, the Columbus-Toronto game, did not kick off at 8 o'clock as advertised. We kind of wrapped up the earlier show as fast as we could to make sure we were ready for 8 o'clock, and then it kicked off at like 8:10, 8:11 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then, or maybe was that delayed to make time for fans to get in? Maybe that's the more generous interpretation, is that it was scheduled for 8, but because there was that problem getting to the stadium, maybe it was pushed back 10 minutes or so.
Maybe, but I think depending on your perspective, I tend to believe the narrative of maybe there was reasons why they weren't allowed into the stadium, and I think they probably didn't want there to be many people in the stadium when the cameras were doing the panoramic shots.
Are you serious? It's like an MLS conspiracy type deal.
I don't think it's an MLS conspiracy. I think it's an Anthony Precourt conspiracy.
Oh, I didn't think of it that way. That's interesting.
I mean, yeah, when you've got people tuning into kickoff and they do the kind of wide shot and the stadium isn't full, if you're kind of like half informed or if you're a neutral coming in, you're like, oh, the playoffs, conference finals, I'll go watch. And you're like, oh, okay, I can see why he wants to move the team. People aren't there. Like, yeah, I think it's definitely an intentional thing for sure.
Wow. I don't know enough to comment about that, but I will say that that's a very interesting idea. And if we could get any evidence of that, then that would kind of break this thing open, right?
Yeah, I think so. But instead, until then, baseless speculation.
But okay, so you also mentioned the second game, Houston-Seattle, kicking off, 4 or 5 minutes before the end of the Columbus-Toronto game.
When I flipped over, we were 10 minutes in, and I flipped over like basically as soon as the Columbus-Toronto game ended.
Oh, I pulled up Fox Soccer Match Pass, and I think that's a few minutes behind, right? Because it's streaming.
Yep.
So yeah, I caught the goal only for that reason, only because the stream was behind the live. Did I manage to catch Svensson's goal? I did. I also went and checked what was on after on Fox Sports 1 that meant they kind of had to kick off at that time, and the answer was just reruns. So there was no like live sporting event that was happening afterwards that we had to hurry this kickoff. So I think that was poor logistics on their part.
You're telling me at midnight, transitioning between a Tuesday and a Wednesday, there wasn't a lot of sporting fare to be put on the television? Get out of here.
I can't remember accurately. I want to say it was like a cowherd show, something like that. And he's not working at midnight, right? That's a rerun of whatever he did today.
All right, see, here is the way, like, given the way, like, the commercials we've seen during some soccer games and the programming that we've seen come on after soccer, I legitimately, for a moment, thought you were saying that there was an actual cow herding competition that came after Fox for a moment. I swear to God. I was like, really? I would watch that. Like, are dogs doing it? I would watch a dog herd cows. That sounds fascinating.
Is it Cowherd and Whitlock? Is that a duo?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I think that's them.
Okay, so, yeah, that's what it was.
For me, that show's called Hard Pass.
That's funny. That's very funny.
Thanks, buddy.
Well, should we talk Houston-Seattle?
Okay.
Because this one, I would again argue that it would benefit from being a one-leg affair, because it only finished 2-0 to Seattle, there's now still kind of a chance that Houston pull this off in the second leg. And again, I would have preferred, just from a neutral perspective, I would have preferred to just have this done and dusted tonight.
I mean, but we're still probably going to watch that one no matter what. I mean, we probably won't watch it. Of course, yeah, we probably won't watch it as closely, or we wouldn't watch it as closely as we will now.
We'll watch as much as we can if the games overlap.
Yeah, but I mean, it felt like it was not good for Houston when that first goal goes in. It's a great header from Gustav Svensson. I would say it's an even better corner from Nico Ladero.
Yeah.
And right there, it felt like, ooh, that's not good. Then the penalty happens, and then Wilburn saves it, and I was like, ooh, okay. Maybe this is like the change they needed. Maybe everything gets righted. Maybe they end up with, oh, no, red card. That's not good. Oh, and another goal.
Before anyone tweets, you meant Joe Willis saves it.
Yes, excuse me.
If Will Bruin had saved it, then Schmetzer would have had to have a serious team talk about all staying on the same page.
I don't know. I'm going to say it's after midnight. That's my excuse. I have Joe Willis in my notes because I also wrote down, I forget who the sideline reporter was, but she noted, did you catch what she reported, which I thought was pretty interesting?
What was that?
Paul Rogers, the Dynamo goalkeeper coach, I guess got up when the penalty happened, went behind their bench. Not sure why he would do that. But Joe Willis looked over at him and he told him which way to dive.
Oh,
so they
okay.
knew what Ladero was going to do, it seems.
That's interesting. Also, of course, Joe Willis, kind of local Richmond hero, because he was very popular when he played here for the Kickers on loan.
All right, then.
All right then. Oh,
I don't think I would say.
You weren't around. Yeah, you weren't around. There was kind of a cult of Joe Willis where the Red Army, which is the Richmond Kickers supporters group, had a big like cutout of his face, like his angry headshot face that he's got. So Angry Joe Willis became like a meme in Richmond for a little while, a real life meme.
We saw a decent amount of Angry Joe Willis this evening as well.
We certainly did. Well, on that penalty, I think I texted you around the time that even though they didn't score, it was the save from Joe Willis with, as you said, help from the goalkeeping coach. It sounds like the fact of the sending off is really it was really the most important thing, right? Because I really felt like even if the penalty saved, this is kind of all over for Houston at this point. As soon as Anibaba goes off, they're down to 10 men, and it could have been like 5-0 by halftime.
I mean, I mostly jokingly, but like a little bit seriously tweeted something along the lines of like Houston are trying to go for the FIFA, like when you're playing FIFA and you're frustrated tactic of see how many players you can get sent off to forfeit the game. Like there were some moments there where I was like, oh, they're going to get another red card here. And there were certainly in the 31st minute when Seattle had literally three players unmarked in Houston's box, and they were all just like so excited to shoot that nobody ended up really getting off a clean shot until it eventually went to Jovan Jones and he shot wide. Yeah. It was still sort of like, this is not good. They need to figure some stuff out. It definitely felt like that could have ended like 4-0 at the half.
So I want to talk about the actual penalty and red card call in a second, but I would say Wilmer Cabrera, I think, calmed things down at halftime. Maybe some chamomile tea or something like that. Like everybody, Houston came out second half much calmer, and I felt like the best possible result at halftime for them was going to be, let's just get out of here at 2-0 and no more red cards. So the chamomile tea team talk definitely worked for Wilmer Cabrera.
I mean, he definitely seems like a pretty affable guy in both of the interviews I saw from him this evening.
Well, can we talk about that red card? My feeling was it's definitely a red card because he just grabs Jovan Jones enough to pull him back, and it's a denial of goal scoring opportunity. But I couldn't help having this very immature thought that if you're gonna get sent off for a foul in the box, you may as well
sweep that leg, man.
Go all in on it. Yeah, you know what I mean?
There's
nothing sensible about what I just said, but it's just a weird feeling I have that it feels weak to get sent off for just a little tiny tug on the shoulder. It's like you've tried not to foul, but you've still done a little more than you should have anyway. So you were sort of half in and half out, but you were half in enough to get yourself sent off and give away a penalty.
See, I disagree because I think it wasn't like he half fouled, and I don't think it was that. I think it was sort of he did what he thought he could get away with, and he was wrong. That's my read on is that he was sort of like, oh no, I was just running, and like my hand happened to make contact because he like, kind of grabs it, pulls, and then lets go. Yeah, in the way that you would do
trick. Yeah, you're right. That's the trick, right? If you grab and then pull and then let go, you can kind of make out that, oh no, there was just like incidental contact. It wasn't a real thing. Yeah. But yeah, he didn't even come close to getting away with it.
No, he did not. No, I mean, and it's like, was it like a vicious tug that really, really threw the player off? Probably not, but it's enough that it's a red card, and I think it's a correct decision. Lots of good decisions this evening, I have to say.
And it was also a really nice through ball from Nico Ladero to put Jovan Jones in behind Anibaba. And even, I saw the ball kind of flashes across the front of Anibaba at one point where I think if he could have this moment again, he might just sort of make a poke at that pass rather than being mesmerised as it passes in front of him.
Well, I feel like, I don't know what Houston players were doing, but it definitely felt like they were very mesmerized by Jovan Jones, period. Because he really did have so much time on the ball, so much space. And if you go to the second goal for Seattle, it really is like it's a great header by Will Bruin. It's what we expect from Will Bruin.
You sure it wasn't Joe Willis heading it in?
It might have been. Let me check. Yes, it was Will Bruin. It's a great header by him, and it's a great ball from Jovan Jones. But I think maybe it was Grant Wall who made the point on Twitter that like no one steps to him. Like Jovan Jones has so much time to the extent that I think he like looks up, looks down, looks up again, and then is like, oh, okay, there he is, and then looks down and plays that ball. And in that time, no one is stepping, no one is putting him under pressure. And I mean, Jovan Jones is that good of a player that he's going to be able to put a ball on a player's head, especially if that player is Will Bruin.
I think that's just part of the sort of panic and disarray that was happening in the 10 Houston players at that point in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think so. And then again, we go back to, I think with all that said, they're pretty lucky to get out of that at just 2-0 down. Roman Torres gets that yellow card, so he's going to be suspended. There are opportunities. We'll just see if they can capitalize. Although I think they're without. Are they without Elise as well?
Albert Elise got a yellow card. He'll be suspended for the second leg. Yeah, rough couple of weeks for Albert Elise with Honduras not making the World Cup.
It's weird that so many players can get yellow cards for dissent, and yet somehow Michael Bradley never opens his mouth. I'm assuming that's what happens. That's one, dude. I don't understand how that man didn't get a yellow card this evening. Because it really was
in the
like
Columbus,
I know
Toronto game.
Yeah, I know he's in the Houston Seattle game. Yes, in the Columbus Toronto game. Like really every time there was a call, like Michael Bradley was in there. Like, can I help? You need anything from me? Can I have any comments? Let me get your face real quick. Okay, cool. I'm glad I was here.
You do get certain privileges for wearing the armband, right? DeMarcus Beasley in the Houston game, I think when things were really heated up, he seemed like the kind of calmest of the Houston players who was talking to the referee, kind of hand over mouth. I'm not sure what he was saying, but he was at least the least agitated of everybody out there.
Yeah, he definitely was summoned over by the referee to be like, hey, can you calm it down?
Yeah.
But I think we've established previously that like that is sort of an unwritten rule that the captain can talk a little bit to the referee, but really the captain's only there for like three things, right?
Yes, I don't want to get into it because I'm not confident in listing it, but yes, it's kind of an unofficial rule as I understand it that the captain gets more leeway to talk to the ref than anybody else.
As I recall, he has three specific jobs, one of which is the coin toss to start the game, one of which is like deciding who goes first in a penalty shootout, and I forget the third thing. So I now understand why you didn't want to get into details, but yeah, it just seemed a little bit like, is he going to get a yellow at any point? Oh, okay, I guess not. That's fine. Whatever. Moving on.
So going back to that Columbus game, didn't Pedro Santos get one for requesting video review? Did you see that?
Sure did. Yep.
I don't know why, but that I wasn't genuinely supporting Columbus because I want them to win MLS Cup, as I said. But I kind of like the idea of that rule being in the books that you don't appeal for the video review, and if you do, you get a yellow card. And I like the consistency of showing that card every time it happens.
I saw somebody tweet something along the lines of, I love that VAR is like this like incredibly famous diva, that it's like, don't even look at me, don't speak to me, don't think about me. Like, it will not be allowed, it will not be tolerated.
All right, so we'll catch back up with these games when the second legs roll around. I actually haven't checked the dates. I am assuming it's next week.
It's actually 2 months from now. It's the weirdness of the MLS schedule, yeah.
So yeah, we'll check in with this. I think weirdly there is still life in that Houston-Seattle game.
I mean, yeah, and I think there's still life there. I think there's things that Houston can do. Certainly, I think Seattle definitely have some vulnerabilities that they can exploit. I think so, Seattle, based on the end of that game, there's a lot of injuries. We'll see who recovers in time to start that game.
Yeah.
And I want to say, with that in mind, I think a big reason why that game was probably more interesting than it had any right to be in those final 10 minutes is because I just mean like 2-0 down with a man off. I think Houston aren't really going to press for anything. They pushed a couple times, but they're not really trying to get a goal because they don't want to leave themselves open.
Yeah.
Seattle, even though I know that they wanted to try to get that third goal to kill it off, I think in those final few minutes, they're not really going to go for it either. So you've got two teams who are like 50% dedicated to attacking. But I think it's a credit to the Houston fans that they stuck around. You could hear them pretty loudly for most of the game, and I think created a good atmosphere that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been there and otherwise wouldn't have made it interesting in those final few minutes.
What about the Columbus-Toronto game? What do you make of... So Toronto didn't get any away goals, but I've still got this weird feeling that Josie and Giovinco are waiting for them in Canada.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah.
I think that if Columbus, I think this was Columbus's opportunity. I think you could see that in some of Greg Berhalter's frustration that was visible. There were times when they'd cut to him. He looked very angry. I think he got into it with Greg Vanney on a couple of occasions. Yeah. I think you could see that he was sort of like feeling that pressure of this is the time, because otherwise we've got a lot of other options to have to deal with. And I'm sure he would have much preferred to go to Toronto with a 1-0 lead, knowing that he could sit back and force Josie and Giovinco to do stuff.
All right, so again, we'll get back to those games when they come around. The final thing I want to talk about with regards to MLS in this first segment is a man whose team was not in the conference final because Portland Timbers lost to Houston, and then he resigned. Caleb Porter.
Yep.
I'm not sure what day it was now, but it was early this week, I think, right? Caleb Porter just resigned, just left Portland Timbers. And I was so shocked. I honestly thought that maybe I'd missed the build up to this and maybe Portland fans knew it was coming. So I sort of checked on Twitter. This is a surprise, right? And turns out every Portland fan seemed shocked that this had happened as well.
Yes.
In hindsight, we've heard a few little suggestions and stories about the reasons behind this, right?
Well, yeah, it sounds like there was some disagreement with ownership at times, with the GM at times. maybe issues with personnel as well, but that all still feels like nothing that was really like simmering or like really was a consistent source of like stress and problems that always felt like maybe it was going to end this way. It felt like, as you said, after the fact, it was like, well, there was that time, and I guess there was that time too, and maybe that one. So I guess it makes sense. It's kind of that felt like the narrative overall.
And my first reaction was, oh, maybe we were about to get a US men's national team announcement here. Like maybe this is Porter leaving the Timbers job so that he can be unveiled as the new US national team coach next week. Then we got the news via Stephen Goff, who had some sources at US Soccer essentially saying there's zero urgency in the coaching announcement. They're probably not going to do it until after the presidential election. So that essentially means that Porter's resignation was in no way related to the US national team job.
No.
And then what I've heard since,
I know you didn't watch. Just to jump in real fast, I know you didn't watch the halftime show, but Taylor Twellman went on a couple rants. One of them was about this in a way that you could tell that he had spent like the last couple of days on Twitter being like, he's not going to Cincinnati, he's not going to Cincinnati, he's not going to Cincinnati, where he basically dismissed a lot of the rumors by saying, I think I couldn't remember if he said it's his understanding or if he just assumes that there's a non-compete clause, which means that if Porter does sign for somebody else, Portland will get compensation. It might mean Porter isn't entitled to some of his compensation. So Twellman more or less guaranteed that Porter won't sign with any club for at least 6 months, if not 12 months.
That's interesting. Yeah, because the rumor was that maybe if Cincinnati get an expansion team, and obviously from his Akron days, he's like sort of very familiar with the Ohio area, that would be a destination for Porter, and then he can sort of build a team from the beginning, essentially. But the other, I think it was on Extra Time Radio, I heard that essentially the rumor was that Porter just wanted some time off, so he's just gonna not coach for a bit. I don't know if that's forced by the non-compete or if it's a genuine thing of, hey, I've done this for a few years. It's time for me to just, take a little time off. It's what Pep Guardiola did, right? Between Barcelona and Bayern.
Yeah, I mean, MLS is grueling. It's a long season with a lot of games, and you've got a lot of stuff you've got to figure out, and you got to hit like your stride at the right time, and it's definitely very stressful. And I can totally understand why, with the end of the playoffs, being like, you know what, it's time for me just to take a little bit of a break. That said, I've also seen it reported that he has basically said, like, I'm not really interested in anything right now, unless maybe like a big market job opens up. And there is some speculation that maybe if things don't get off to it. Well, yeah, sure. I'm sure Pep will give him a glowing recommendation. But no, I think I've seen some speculation that maybe if things don't get off to a great start with the Galaxy next season, maybe that becomes an option, especially because, and I did not know this until this evening, Caleb Porter's roommate in college, Chris Klein. So there's definitely an existing relationship there as well.
Interesting. Can I ask you, what would you think of Caleb Porter as US men's national team coach? If that was announced, say, after the election, or if it was announced tomorrow, how would you feel about Caleb Porter as US men's national team coach?
I think I would feel about him as U.S. national team coach the same way I would feel about most of the names that have been like listed that are MLS related, in that I'd be like, okay, but I wouldn't be excited about it. I think the only one who was outside of that was Oscar Pereja, but this season went so poorly that that's kind of knocked him down a little bit.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I feel like with Caleb Porter, there's like obviously very high highs that you can point to, but then there's also like, well, they didn't make the playoffs and the U20s were terrible. I don't know what to make of that. So it's kind of, with everybody, there's checks and balances.
So actually, the one response I kept seeing was U23s, right? He tried to qualify the U23s for the 2012 Olympics, I want to say, and they failed. But in hindsight, I look at that and think, at that point, Caleb Porter hadn't ever coached professionally. He was still the Akron coach when he took that job. And then I sort of, I did a bit of reading.
It's also worth noting that it's not like the U23s were in this like pristine position where they were like obviously going to qualify, and then he ruined it all. Like, as we've seen, USU setup is slightly problematic.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of that lost generation era, right? So you could also argue you didn't necessarily have the talent to work with, or you probably should still qualify out of CONCACAF for the Olympics.
I mean, it's tough. Only 2 spots.
But the thing, yeah, that's true. The thing I was thinking though is, if you think of his first year or two at Portland, there was all that Porter ball stuff, right? Where he goes all in, high press possession. He's trying to be like the American Guardiola. And I think he was still trying to do that with that Olympic team, because it was before he'd kind of learned his lesson about having to what's the word, like negotiate and change a little bit, and you can't do that same sort of thing all the time. And by the time he wins MLS Cup, it's because he's learned to adapt his tactics and do things a little differently. So I'm not inclined to hold that failure to qualify for the Olympics against him in terms of the US men's national team job. And if you're thinking of, you want an American coach for the US, he's one of the more exciting names. So I've come around to this idea that if he was announced, I'd be kind of happy about it.
If you're inclined to think that it needs to be an American, then yeah, I can see that argument. I mean, and certainly he has, as I said, he has those high highs. He won the college title with Akron. He won MLS with Portland, and he did so by adjusting his tactics based on the available personnel and what was working best, and that's kind of what you have to do.
He won the Western Conference this year. Portland finished top of the Western Conference this year in Major League Soccer.
True. I genuinely think, and again, like I don't want to take us down a negative path, but if I'm being totally honest, I think a big part of this, and I was thinking about this before we started recording, is that right now I'm just sort of down about Major League Soccer. Yeah. And that's not to say like, oh, it's just so bad, the quality's so bad. It's just sort of like there's a negative feeling right now. I think the situation with the U.S. national team hasn't helped. I think some of the
Columbus
way
stuff.
Things have gone since has not helped. Obviously, the Columbus stuff as well, and the feeling that like Garber knew about this. A lot of people knew about this. People are trying to cover it up. There's some shady stuff happening. Maybe there's some shady stuff happening behind the doors that it's like just general operating stuff. And it just kind of has this like cloud over Major League Soccer, in my mind at least right now. And so I think that, again, and then that permeates into like, well, I don't know if like Caleb Porta, I don't know. I just don't feel that passionately about it as I might have if things were better in the league.
All right, so we've got 3 listener questions to get to. But first, Taylor, today's show is sponsored by our old friends at Fuchi, Futchi. Fuchi are the makers of the Soccer Rebounder. It's also soccer meets squash.
It certainly is. You can play by yourself to practice your skills. You can play against an opponent or a group of opponents. All of those are options. I have to say that based on this evening's results, if there were one player I think I really wouldn't want to go against, I think it's got to be Nico Ladero.
Why is that? Just because he can measure the weight.
I mean, he knows how to serve a ball perfectly so that it lands exactly where he wants it to. We've talked about how you've got to be able to judge not just the power. You can't just hit it with power. You've got to make sure it bounces into the square. I think he'd be able to do that. But I think he's so versatile. Like tonight he was out wide, but then he would cut inside. Sometimes he'd pop up on the left for some reason. Like you don't know where he's going to be on the court, Daryl. It's unpredictable.
I think I wouldn't want to play against Anibaba because I think he would grab you as you tried to play your shot.
Yeah, I think you talked about this like in the last one that like there is an element of you've got to get out of the person's way, right? Like you can't just like kick the ball and then stand right in front of the net like, oh, sorry, I guess I blocked it. And I do feel like, maybe you get a little bit of shirt pulling, you get a little bit of like obstruction. You're right. That wouldn't be so much fun. And you're right. It would absolutely be more fun to play against Nico Ladero because it would up your game versus a person who's just like ruthlessly like kicking you in the shins as you try to volley it.
And I wouldn't want to play against Pedro Santos because he'd be appealing for video review on every missed call.
And since we do tend to film our Fuchi sessions, it would be available.
So it is worth saying, one of the things I wanted to point out when we did this ad is you and I use Fuchi as sort of a fun competitive thing where we play against each other, but it also can be used as a rebounder simply to improve your technique, right? You could... If you wanted to, you could spend hours sort of playing the ball against it and then it comes back to you and then you play it back. You could get a lot of touches in a very short space of time with a Fuchi rebounder. And so it's very much worth... go ahead.
And I was going to add, to go off of that, I absolutely agree. And I think a big part of that is because whereas you can kick against a wall and it'll come right back to you. The rebounder, again, the reason why we say it's designed and engineered is because it does so to adjust where the ball is going to go based on where you hit it and the power you hit it. If you hit it low, I think we've talked about this, you hit it low, it pops up high.
Yes.
You hit it high, it tends to go down low. So then you've got to adjust. It's not just the ball popping back to you in the same spot every time. That doesn't really help you develop.
Also, if you're kicking the ball against the wall, you eventually ruin your ball.
This is true. And also,
with Fuchi.
And also, you're just waiting to be like photographed by a photography student in black and white as like a sign of the depression of youth. And you don't want to be that either.
So if you would like to get a Fuchi rebounder as a Christmas gift, a holiday gift, either for yourself, maybe you should send the link to someone and give them a little hint, maybe I could get this. Or if you want to buy it for, your friend, loved one, for your kid, you can get a discount of $20.17 if you go to playfuchi.com. Link will be in the show notes. Use the discount code TSS2017 for $20.17 off. That's in addition to the discount that is currently available on the Fucci website. This is the absolute best time to buy a Fucci rebounder.
I agree wholeheartedly, my friend.
So thank you to Fucci for sponsoring today's Total Soccer show and
Indeed.
for sponsoring us over the last many, many months. I'm going to say it's been at least a year since Fucci started sponsoring us.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Do you want to move on to listener questions?
Do I?
Is that a yes?
Do. Yes.
Okay. First question today comes from Joel Webb. Joel Webb wants to know, it's an MLS question. You ready? Mm-hmm. Is the current pace of Major League Soccer expansion helping or hurting the quality of play and the long-term well-being of the league? Do you think they are over-expanding and or expanding, too fast?
No, I guess is my answer. I don't think it's they're over expanding or expanding too quickly, because thus far every franchise that has been added to the league has more or less succeeded. I guess the only outlier would be Chivas, and that was for, I'd say, outlier reasons. So generally speaking, I think they've been pretty wise in the way that they've selected the cities.
In the modern era, definitely, right?
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, and I think I kind of forget that it's basically been Don Garber doing that since he took over. There were 12 teams. Then there was retraction. Now we're at 28, soon to be 32 probably. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not at 28, but soon we'll be at 28. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, then it's been good, and it's been kind of steady growth for the league, at least from an outsider. I would say, and then in terms of dilution of talent, I don't think it's that big of an issue, because there have been so many changes with GAM and TAM and international roster slots and all that good stuff, homegrown players as well. So I think there's still plenty of talent out there. That's not really my issue with expansion.
Yeah, because I would say, if you're talking dilution of talent, soccer is global, right? If you look at Atlanta's roster, and they're bringing in guys like Almiron and Joseph Martinez, it almost doesn't matter in terms of how many players are in the United States, because a lot of these teams are going to bring in foreign players to really amp up the roster. But then the flip side of that is, I would say, the more teams means hopefully more development academies that don't charge, means hopefully more opportunities for young players coming through. And I kind of feel like, if we're going to be having Major League Soccer as the dominant sort of soccer league in the United States, and there's no way to do sort of a blow it up pro-rel type thing, which, that might be the alternative thing that happens in the next year or so, then you're better off having as many teams as possible, because then you have a big team in as many towns as possible. I think that's good for soccer in the long run. And you can always fill the teams with either local players or foreign players that you bring in.
And to that end, I would say I think it's better for for soccer as a whole in this country, not U.S. soccer, but just soccer generally speaking, for them to expand as fast as possible. Because the reality is, as I said, I think if they continue to expand, they're probably going to cap it at 32 teams, unless they drop into a weird MLS 1, MLS 2 sort of system. And then once you've got 32, that's kind of it. And so then I think if you do that quickly, suddenly, if you're, say, Detroit and you don't get an MLS franchise, now that makes you think, okay, we've got to look at other options then. And I do feel like right now, because there are still those spots out there, other cities are sort of holding on to hope that maybe they'll get that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And maybe once you expand to the full 32, it sort of locks all that down. And now maybe that does allow for other leagues to come into existence, because you've got cities that want a soccer club there.
So you're saying, if you're going to do it, get it over with so the other leagues can get on with it?
I think so. I mean, I think it's kind of, for example, to me, it's kind of silly right now that they are building up the announcement of which two cities are going to get the next two franchises when there are three eligible, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm sick of it basically right now. I'm sick of the which city is going to get the expansion talk, because I feel like there's room for all of them. And there's no need to have this, I would almost call it an artificial competition where you're making every city dance for Don Garber. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That said, I feel like the writing's on the wall as to which two are going to be getting it. So again, that maybe makes it even stronger for me of come on, guys, how this is going to go. Just name the two, and then they can kind of actually start preparing.
Yeah, I agree. All right, but we're not worried about overexpansion.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's lots of other issues that I have with Major League Soccer related to expansion, but I don't think overexpansion or dilution of talent is either of them. Okay,
if you disagree, please tweet at us furiously. I'm sure we'll enjoy that. Next question comes from, that was sarcastic, by the way. Next question comes from Andy Blankenship. Andy wants to know, this is a Man United question, Taylor. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think about Anthony Martial playing behind Romelu Lukaku? Sort of Lukaku is the centre forward, Martial just behind him, with Marcus Rashford on the left and Mkhitaryan or maybe Lingard on the right. Andy says, I know it likely won't happen, but I think Martial could be fun or productive in that spot.
Yeah. You want to take that one, Daryl?
So you're asking for sort of an unbiased non-Man United fan opinion on this?
I mean,
maybe.
Well, you call me biased?
Because, well, no, but at least invested, shall we say?
I see.
Because I'm also assuming that Andy is a Man United fan, right? Because why else would you be thinking so deeply about how Man United line up?
Yeah.
And I also think maybe the reason he's asking this question is because maybe Andy is tired of seeing the Mourinho thing of sometimes Rashford starts on the left, sometimes Anthony Martial starts. Am I right? He's basically rotating them on that left side of attack.
Pretty much.
I think it won't work, and I think the reason is Jose Mourinho. The way he plays, he very rarely, if ever, plays with two centre forwards, which is, I think, is essentially what Andy is asking for, right? He's asking for Lukaku and Martial. That would be two forwards. Jose Mourinho likes an attacking midfielder who also has a lot of defensive responsibility. So you're asking Martial then to do something that I don't think comes naturally to him, because that's not what he wants to be doing. And then you'd break Jose Mourinho's system in doing it. So really, if you're going to do this, it's almost like you want to go back to an old-fashioned Alex Ferguson 4-4-2 type scenario, and it would be like York and Cole or Cole and Sheringham would be the Lukaku-Martial partnership. So maybe it would look nice, but I think the defensive strength that United have would be lost.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I think maybe Andy would say, like, no, I'm not saying it needs to be a 4-4-2. I'm saying, like, Anthony Martial could be the number 10. That's, like, where Juan Mata tends to play, or sometimes Mkhitaryan. But the reality is, as you said, Anthony Martial isn't a number 10. He was either number 9 when he was at Monaco, or he's a wide player with Manchester United. And so I think if you look at the way Mourinho uses that central kind of attacking player, it's not always to score goals. It's rarely to score goals, I would say, in Juan Mata's case. It's more about linking up play, being that kind of technical player who can see things. Anthony Martial, his skill set is more so fast, dribbly, clinical finisher. Those work really well. But I don't think you could use those as a number 10, because I don't think he'd be good enough at linking up play. And so I think you're absolutely right. You definitely have to change the entire formation to make that work.
How do you feel about the Martial-Rashford rotation?
I like it.
You like it? Why do you like it?
I like it because I think they're both very good players, and I'm kind of a believer in the idea that, like, you want your players to feel settled, but you also want them to feel pushed. And I think that is going to help them both be better players in the long run, because if Rashford has a bad game, he knows Martial is there scoring goals when he comes on as a substitute. And when Martial starts, if he has a bad game, the same thing. I also think it helps United overall, because if Marcus Rashford does Marcus Rashford things and runs as hard as he does for 75 minutes, that defender is gassed. And then suddenly on comes Anthony Martial, and vice versa. So I think it works really well. I don't know if it's sustainable long term, because I can imagine one of them getting kind of fed up and wanting consistent minutes in a position where they're a little bit more comfortable. But for now, I think it works.
I think as well, it can't work forever, but I think it works this season because they're both so young, right? So it's not a bad idea to not wear them out, especially if they're both hoping to go to the World Cup. They'll get to Russia next summer feeling at least a little more refreshed than if they'd just gone hard 90 minutes every week in the same spot. So I guess, sorry, Andy, you're just kind of stuck with how it is.
I think where you might see Martial like deployed a little more centrally is if United are really chasing, they might move him in there, because crossing is certainly not his skill set. As I said, dribbling and shooting definitely are.
Yeah.
So maybe you see that then, but outside of that, I don't really see him being too much of a central player. Although it could be interesting. You never know. I don't necessarily disagree with Andy that it could be interesting. I just don't know if it would ever really happen.
It wouldn't be Joseing, let's put it that way.
Certainly not.
All right, final question of today comes from Jacob K. Jacob K asks, why aren't more people focused on qualifying for and performing well at the 2020 Olympics? This is, I assume, a US men's national team question. Because didn't we, a couple shows ago, we went through all the possible tournaments in another listener question that the US could be playing at, and the 2020 Olympics wasn't mentioned. Jacob says, I know it's not the most glamorous of competitions football-wise, but it seems perfect for putting together a team of relatively young players in a sort of, parentheses, competitive tournament. I have not heard a single commentator talking about it as a goal, and just wanted to know if I was missing something.
I don't think Jacob's missing anything, because I don't think anyone's really talking about it. I have mixed emotions about the Olympics. I'll say that I think people aren't really talking about it because it tends to be a youth tournament, right? It's U23 players with 3 exceptions.
Yep.
And so I think it's something that people look at as not necessarily a luxury, but it's much more of like it's a time to play your exciting youngsters and see how they do in a competitive format. And I think given how many problems there are across U.S. soccer, I think people aren't probably focused on it because they're not focused on what is essentially a youth tournament.
So I have a slightly different take, which is the reason no one's talking about it when they're listing all the tournaments that are coming up is that because we haven't qualified for the last two, everybody's forgotten that this is a tournament we can play in.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So we didn't qualify for 2012 with Catapulta, like we talked about earlier, and we didn't qualify for 2016. So I really think it's off everybody's radar as a soccer tournament.
Can I add Exhibit A to that?
What's that?
I went to look to see like which of the people that played in those U23 qualifiers, that final one against Colombia, like who is still eligible. So I went and looked at U23 U.S. national team. Do you know when the last time they played was?
That game?
Correct.
Yeah, of course.
But
this is how it always is, right? The team doesn't get put together until a few months before the qualifying tournament. Then they play some warm-up games and they go to the qualifying tournament.
Yeah, but so I absolutely agree with you that I think because we haven't been there, it's just sort of like, oh, it's like maybe we can make it, but more often than not, we're not going to, so we don't really need to focus on it.
So I would argue two things here. I'd say one, there is value in the US qualifying for this because it would, first of all, if we could, so the CONCACAF qualifying tournament, if it follows previous calendar, would be in, I think, October 2019. That's when we'd be doing this. I think there's definitely value in qualifying because we've missed the last two, almost just to put a stamp down in CONCACAF and be like, hey, we're back to being at least quite good. Like, everybody pay attention. And then you do get a lot of players who maybe don't get the tournament experience of going to the World Cup. They get to go to the Olympics. It's not as good, obviously, but it's still something. It's not nothing, right?
Well, here's the thing where I disagree with you, though, Daryl, is because I think one of the reasons why people maybe aren't as focused on it is because we have literally no idea who will be in that team. And I say that because there are 5 players right now who are going to be eligible for that who I don't think will ever play for that U23 team. And so then you wonder, are those guys going to be there? And so I think it's still valuable to get maybe other youngsters who wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity like to get some of those minutes. But I think that's also part of it is that like I think we would agree that Christian Pulisic probably isn't going to play for that team. Maybe if they qualify for the Olympics, he'll go in there. But same goes for Cameron Carter-Vickers, for Weston McKennie, for Jonathan Gonzalez, and Josh Sargent. I feel like those guys are maybe going to start getting looks for the senior team or already have. So I find it hard to believe that then they'll suddenly be on that Olympic qualifying team.
So that was going to be my next point, is that I think if you did want to get excited about the 2020 Olympics, which by the way is in Tokyo, or you wanted to get excited about the 2019 CONCACAF Olympic qualifying tournament, you immediately start thinking, like, what's the best U23 US team I could put together? And it would have Pulisic and Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams, and you really could put together an incredible team. But probably those guys won't be available because the way this works is that I don't think you even have to release your players to some of this, either to the Olympics or to the CONCACAF tournament. I'd have to double check on that. But no, like, for example, if you play in the Olympics, it overlaps a little with the start of the actual season, right? So clubs aren't thrilled about letting their players go. So as you said, Taylor, we'd be looking at kind of a second string youth team that the US puts together to send to the qualifying tournament and maybe even to the Olympics. And that would be in some ways a good thing because it would mean that the guys like Adams and McKennie have already graduated to the proper US men's national team. But it means that we'll be testing the depth of the US program to see what else is down there.
That's definitely true.
Yeah, which is a valuable exercise in itself, right? But could also end in disappointment.
That is true. The other wrinkle in there is that there's a decent chance that we have another Copa America in 2020 here in the U.S. or elsewhere where the United States and some other CONCACAF teams are participating, in which case the 5 I listed plus Tyler Adams, forgot him, that makes 6, those guys are probably playing in the Copa America. So then so then you really do have more spots opening up for young players, and that makes it interesting, and definitely it's competitive minutes whether or not the team qualifies. I think it's still going to be a good experience.
And if anyone can remember in 2016, do you remember Neymar? He sat and watched Copa America, but then he went to the Olympics because Brazil were hosting it and they were desperate to win it. So Neymar was all in on winning the Olympics with Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is like I think it was always sort of the narrative was no one really cares about the Olympics except for Brazil. And now that they've won it, I think that might be nobody cares about the Olympics except for maybe the United States, because we've got to get to some tournament and look halfway decent.
But I do think when there's a team with something to prove, like Brazil wanted to prove something, right, by having that final medal that they didn't have. When Mexico, I think, really wanted to make a splash on the world stage, and they won it in 2012, I believe. And going back, I think Leo Messi sort of when he was younger, was sort of all in on winning the Olympics with Argentina. I think he won it in 2008, and it was very important to him. I don't think it would be a bad thing for the US to put some priority on it and try and sort of just get the experience of winning a tournament. You know what I'm saying?
I mean,
if Mexico can do it, the US can do it.
You think the United States can win the Olympics?
I mean, I'm not saying they will. I'm saying it's within the realms of possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
See, this is the attitude we've got to change by qualifying for the 2020 Olympics.
No, I just don't think. I genuinely don't think that if your stated objective is to win the tournament, I think that you're not starting off on a very good point. Because then if you don't, then it's a failure. And I think that's kind of the problem, is that I don't think the United States, again, given the situation and given what we've already talked about, where you might not have players there for a variety of reasons, then if you're sort of being like, we're going to win it, this is what we got to do, we got to prove we belong, we got to make a splash. If we don't make it out of the group, then are things worse than they were before? That's kind of how it comes off.
How about we start with some modest goals, and we start with making it a goal to actually qualify for the Olympics this time, which we've failed to do in the last 2 cycles. How about that?
I'm okay with that. I'll take that. That's fine with me.
Okay. Thank you to Joel, to Andy, and to Jacob for today's questions. If you've got questions you'd like us to answer on the show, go to totalsoccershow.com/questions. There is a form to fill out, and then it all gets collated into one big document so we can look at all the questions and sort of, pick them out and answer them as we go. More questions tomorrow, maybe, Taylor.
I think that's a decent possibility. But until then, we've got 11 scouting reports to get to, Darryl Grove.
11 again? Did we have 11 on the last show and 11 on today's show?
That we did, my friend.
All right. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'll go first. Up first is Ryan Marzak, scouting Josh Onoma, the 20-year-old English attacking midfielder on loan at Aston Villa from Tottenham. The English Luka Modric, I feel like there's a couple of those, started for Steve Bruce's side this weekend against QPR and helped them earn a 2-1 victory. He created several chances but couldn't find the back of the net. Still, says Ryan, quote, as a Spurs fan, I love seeing Onoma having such a critical role on a championship contender, end quote.
Much like the Highlander, there is only one, Taylor. There's only one English Luka Modric, and it's Josh Onoma. He also,
what about Marcus Edwards?
No, he's the English Leo Messi, I believe.
Oh, okay. My mistake. So we're just kind of ramping up expectations across the board.
So to double down on this, Onoma scored the winner for Aston Villa in a game that was played today, Tuesday. So he's really doing well for Aston Villa.
Yeah, there you go. English. I don't even know if Gabriel Batistuta.
Up next, Josh Cooper is scouting Henry Onyekuru, the 20-year-old Nigerian attacker on loan at Anderlecht from Everton. Josh says,
is an action-packed report. I'm just telling you now.
I will prepare myself. Josh says, it's been a busy few weeks for Henry. He was called up by Nigeria for their final qualifying match and got his first cap coming on for the final 20 minutes in a 1-1 draw away to Algeria. He then started for Anderlecht this past weekend and scored in the 80th minute, scored the game winner against Royal Excel Mouscron. That's his 7th goal in 14 games, and people have started to notice, most notably his parent club, who, side note, are not doing well. Everton are trying to find a way to get a, quote, special talent work permit so that he can be recalled in January. They could certainly use him. Also, he needs to get a UK work permit before he can play for Everton. I got it.
Indeed. Up next, Alec Brew scouting Davy Selke, 22-year-old German striker for Hertha Berlin. Selke played the full 90 against Mönchengladbach this past Saturday in Hertha's 4-2 defeat. In USMNT news, Fabian Johnson had the second assist on Mönchengladbach's opener, and the result moved Gladbach into 4th place and pushed Borussia Dortmund out of the Champions League places.
Ryan Marzak. Oh, again, Ryan Marzak is scouting 2 players. I forgot. Ryan Marzak is scouting Pione Sisto, the 22-year-old Danish forward for Celta Vigo. Ryan says Sisto kept his great run of form going this weekend on the road at Sevilla. Celta Vigo lost 2-1, but it was Pione's pristine ball, easy for me to say, from 40 yards out that Maxi Gomez headed in to put them up 1-0 early on. As a scout for Sisto, the strike was fantastic, but the header from Gomez may be one of the best headed strikes I have ever seen. Oh, I'm going to have to go and watch this.
Yeah, I don't know how old Maxi Gomez is. Get him in that scouting network? Question mark?
Maybe.
He's probably like 29. Patrick Keeler scouting Anthony Robertson, the 20-year-old English-American left back on loan at Bolton from Everton. I feel the need to emphasize American over English
especially with our lack of left backs, right?
Ooh, yes, indeed. Hands off, England. Anthony is now sporting a Kleshton-esque mustache and a Fabian Johnson-esque afro as he continues to get starts for Bolton, who are undefeated since September. Anthony's loan is due to expire in January, but Bolton seem confident that Everton will agree, or maybe already have agreed. They seem to be indicating that that's the case, to extend Anthony's loan for the remainder of the season.
Ooh, so no January camp for Anthony Robinson because he's going to be busy playing over in England. But maybe a call up in March when we have those March friendlies.
Sure.
Up next, the Reverend Joel Talbot is scouting Chris Goslin, 17-year-old American midfielder for Atlanta United. Atlanta United declined options on 7 players Monday. I thought this was going to be bad news for Goslin, but it's not. They declined options on 7 players on Monday with emphasis on retooling their depth at goalkeeper, defence and midfield. Goslin is still under contract, a homegrown player contract, I believe, and the clear-out puts him even closer to regular starters Jeff Laurentowicz and Carlos Carmona. In addition, Atlanta recently announced a 2018 USL affiliate in Gwinnett, which is an Atlanta suburb. This makes it all the more likely that Goslin gets minutes at the pro level next year. All right, I like the sound of that Gwinnett USL team for Goslin and Carlton et al.
Alrighty, John Roeder scouting Jacob Bruin Larsen, 19-year-old Danish winger at Dortmund. I did not know about him until this report. Bruin Larsen was named captain of the BVB U19s in their UEFA Youth League matchup against the Tottenham U19s. Thumbs up. However, he was subbed off in the 18th minute due to what Google Translate says was an injury to his shin in a 50-50 challenge. The young Spurs went on to win 3-1. Thumbs down, says John.
Steve Renard is scouting Yuri Tielemans, the 20-year-old Belgian midfielder at Monaco. Tielemans played the full 90, say Steve, in a disappointing 1-1 draw for Monaco in Amiens. To Steve's inexpert eye, I'm assuming that's Steve's judgment of his eyes, not ours, Taylor. Yuri's largest contributions were standing in a defensive wall during a free kick, standing around while other people did stuff, and celebrating when Stefan Jovetic... celebrating with Stefan Jovetic when he scored the equaliser.
Yes. See, it was a much longer report and very funny. Thank you for that, Steve. Mike Spinelli scouting George Bello, 15-year-old American left back for Atlanta United. Bello is training with the USMNT U18s, marking the official transition of this squad from the U16s. He's the only player in the group born in 2002. The rest were born in 2001. And he's obviously also still eligible for the U17 World Cup as well.
Yeah, I'm expecting him to be called up to that U17 squad by John Hackworth.
I would say that's a safe bet, and it is John Hackworth.
Isn't from previous Mike Spinelli scouting reports on George Bello, he was also playing up several years in the Atlanta Academy, right? Playing for like the U19s and all that. So he's another one that we could see at that Gwinnett team maybe next season.
There we go.
Also today, CJ Lutinen is scouting Cesar Montes, 20-year-old Mexican centre-back at Monterrey. CJ says it has been an unexpectedly quiet month for Montes after he was called into the Mexican national team. Montes played 45 minutes and earned a clean sheet against Poland, sans Lewandowski, and did not appear in the 3-3 draw with Belgium. As was the fear regarding Jonathan Gonzalez, Montes returned to Los Rayados. The striped ones is what I've been told as well, Taylor, elsewhere after I asked. Los Rayados, Monterrey means the striped ones. He returned injured and missed the final match of the Apertura against Tigres. He's expected to be back for the playoffs, and Goal.com's John Arnold, we know John Arnold, pegged him for a World Cup roster spot in Arnold's Mexican national team roster preview.
There we go. Lots going on with Cesar. Final report from Wills Green, scouting Phil Foden, a 17-year-old English midfielder from Manchester City. Have you heard of him, Daryl?
We talked about him on the last show, right? Yes.
Oh, you know him?
I do.
Oh, I don't know. I thought he was like some off-the-radar hipster kid. Just kidding. Phil made his official Manchester City debut on Tuesday in a 1-0 win against Feyenoord away in Rotterdam. After sitting on the bench in a few Premier League and Champions League games, he subbed in for Yaya Toure in the 75th minute to tumultuous applause from the away end. Off the pitch, there has been unconfirmed talk about Foden moving up to the England U21 team, after his dominating displays for the U17s. In addition, Guardiola has repeatedly mentioned that he won't loan the youngster out, and Foden will instead train with the senior team for the rest of the season. That makes me happy for Phil Foden, not happy for the rest of the league, because I, like you, saw that video of Pep Guardiola working with Raheem Sterling, and I understand now why Man City players are getting better.
Yeah, so would you mind describing that video to people?
I mean, it's like insanity in its purest form. It's essentially... I think what Guardiola is teaching Raheem Sterling is that he's got to open up more and like open himself up to the play, so he's in a better position to transition from defense to attack or to kind of move the ball forward.
I think it's about receiving the ball, like opening yourself up to receive the ball easily.
But it is a great, even with like no sound, just watching the video, it's a great example of like you can just like Mystery Science 3000 dub in the words like, yeah, I got it. Because they really do walk like 20 yards as Guardiola continues to follow him and sort of tell him this stuff. And you can just see Raheem Sterling like, all right, I better commit this to memory. Otherwise, I'm going to hear about this all the time.
Yeah, Guardiola was not letting him off with an I got it, right? It was like, you are going to get it by the end of this. And then, did you watch all the way to the end of that clip?
I guess not.
Oh, so at the end of the clip is Raheem Sterling's goal. I think it was against Feyenoord, or maybe it was something from this weekend, where he does exactly what Guardiola was teaching him, and it results in a Manchester City goal. Pep Guardiola is going to win England the World Cup.
You think so?
I just think he's like improving a lot of players in this way.
I knew what you meant in the sense that he's improving a bunch of English players in the lead up to the World Cup, but I also do wonder if maybe there's a chance that one day he manages England.
Oh, I mean, I would just run out and celebrate for a whole night if that happened. You wouldn't even hear from me.
But like as several people have already like pointed out, that level of intensity is probably not sustainable, and you do understand then why he tends to take these like 3-year contracts or these year-to-year contracts, because I think at a certain point it's like, man, I have no energy left, and I've got to go out there and like rant at players for the next 2 hours. But I'm going to take next season off.
But on the plus side, Raheem Sterling is now really good, so that's probably what Guardiola's thinking.
I think he was always pretty good.
But now he's really good. Yeah. Okay, thank you to Ryan, Josh, Alec, Ryan, Patrick, Joel Tolbert, John Roda, Steve, Mike, CJ, and Wills. I did a mix of first names and both names there.
Can I ask you a question
today's
there,
Scouting Reports. Yeah.
Did you put the piece of paper away and then forget that you still had to read the names?
I did have to reach down and grab it. Did you hear me move away from the mic?
Slightly. And I was like, I know what he did because I've seen him do that in studio.
Yeah, I didn't have it as well set up in studio. I had to lean farther than anticipated. Let's put it that way. So thank you to everybody who sent scouting reports. If you'd like to join the Scouting Network, it is totalsoccershow.com/join. If you join at the $10 a month level or higher, we guarantee to answer a question a month on the Total Soccer Show. If you join at any level, we will send you a young player. Again, we won't send you a young player. We will assign you a young player to keep an eye on. And we ask you to watch highlight videos. Just watch like 2 or 3 minute highlight videos of what they were doing that weekend. Search their name on Twitter. Just find bits of news, see what they were involved in. It is not the big commitment that some people fear that it is, right? We don't expect you to watch 90 minutes of every game that your player plays in. Just keep tabs. Not spaces.
Speak for yourself.
Not
for
spaces.
Yourself, that's a perfect way to round it out. Well done. You put a cap on this one.
So, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, hermano.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll be back one more time sort of late on Wednesday with I'm going to call it a Thanksgiving special. How about that, Taylor?
Fair.
All right. So we will talk to you then.